My friends, I speak to you today as one who has seen the great wheels of industry turn, who has watched empires of commerce rise from the dust, and who has learned, through years of both struggle and triumph, that the true wealth of a man is not found in his bank ledger, but in the internal government of his own soul. There are mornings, I know, when you awaken and find that the air feels heavy with an oppression you cannot quite name. You feel a pressure upon the chest, a quiet dread in the spirit, a sense that some unseen calamity is waiting for you beyond the threshold of your home, hidden within the coming hours of the day. You do not speak this aloud, for a man of character is loath to confess his tremors, but you feel it nonetheless. You find yourself whispering a silent plea. I hope that the events of this day do not break me. Fear, that most insidious of shadows, begins its work before the sun has even cleared the horizon. But hear me now, and hear me well. There exists a spiritual law, a law of the mind and of the universe that is older than your fear, stronger than your doubt, and more faithful than your most agonizing uncertainty. It is a law so absolute and so powerful that the moment you truly grasp its mechanics, fear loses its voice and its authority over your life. This law is not a modern invention. It is as ancient as the hills, and it is contained with sublime clarity in the words of the 91st Psalm. I implore you, do not rush past this as if it were mere Sunday sentiment. Most men, to their great detriment, read the scriptures or the great philosophers with a casual eye, never realizing that they are holding the very blueprint to their own protection and success. They glance at the words as if they were reading a common newspaper, but they never turn the key to unlock the authority hidden behind the text. The message of the 91st Psalm is not poetry, it is a covenant. It is a contract between the individual and the infinite intelligence that governs this world. It is a spiritual decree that, when understood, arms a man with a boldness that no danger can challenge and no panic can unseat. Ask yourself something with the utmost honesty. How many days of your life have been guided and restricted by the hand of fear? Fear of failure in your enterprises, fear of financial loss, fear of the sickness that stalks the city, fear of betrayal by those you trusted, fear of not having enough to sustain your house, fear of the shadows your own imagination creates. Fear has stolen more opportunities from the men of this generation than any competitor or enemy they will ever meet in the open market. Yet, I offer you a different life, a life conducted under the gospel of wealth and the law of success, a life where you walk as one who is protected, guided, and covered by a power far beyond your own meager physical strength. Imagine a life where danger may approach your gates, but it cannot overtake your spirit. A life where uncertainty still exists, for such is the nature of business, but where panic has no place in your counsel. Imagine rising in the morning and saying with the certainty of a man who owns his own soul, I am not alone today. The master of the universe is my partner. Before I reveal to you how this ancient wisdom becomes a shield around you, you must grasp this fundamental truth. You do not overcome fear by resisting it. You do not win by wrestling with shadows. You overcome fear by replacing it with a greater, more scientific truth. Fear thrives only in the absence of faith. Fear grows rank and wild in the absence of spiritual authority. Fear dominates the man who tries to face the complexities of life, relying solely on his own limited strength. The 91st Psalm changes the very chemistry of your existence. It gives you access to a higher strength and a divine confidence that lifts you above the reach of ordinary trembling fear. It is not merely a passage of text, it is a fortress of the mind. But like any great library or institution I have ever built, you must choose to walk into it and make it your own. Reflect for a moment on the times when fear has paralyzed your hand. Think of when you stood at the edge of a great decision, perhaps an investment, a new venture, or a change in path, but you stepped back into the safety of the crowd instead of forward into the light of achievement. Think of when you wanted to speak for the right but remained silent, when you wanted to rise but felt unworthy of the height. All those moments of failure trace back to a single error. You believed you were unprotected and alone in a hostile world. But imagine, just imagine for a moment, waking tomorrow with a conviction born of this spiritual covenant. Imagine rising with the absolute knowledge that you dwell in the secret place of the Most High, and that no thought or event formed against you can enter that refuge. Imagine walking through the smoke and noise of the industrial world, knowing you are carried, shielded, and guarded by laws as certain as the law of gravity. Imagine fear knocking at your door, and you answering it with a faith so scientifically grounded and so spiritually strong that fear finds no place to stand. This is not a flight of fancy. This is the application of the law. Look at the promises woven through this covenant: shelter from the storm, refuge from the heat, deliverance from the snares of the world, protection from the pestilence of doubt, and the assurance that angels, those unseen forces of infinite intelligence, are assigned to guard your path. These are not metaphors for the weak. They are the conditions of a divine agreement. The man who truly believes them does not walk as a trembling servant of fate. He walks as a fearless heir to the riches of the universe. I challenge you to consider, why is it that some men endure the most terrifying storms of financial panic and social upheaval with a calm that borders on the divine, while others collapse at the first sign of a falling market? It is not a matter of temperament or luck. It is the presence or absence of spiritual certainty. The man anchored in this law does not panic when trouble rises. He does not retreat when the shadows grow long in the afternoon. He does not crumble when the news is grim or when the foundations of the world seem to tremble. He may feel the vibration of fear knocking at the edge of his mind, but he does not grant it entrance. He stands under a different covering, the covering of divine protection. Understand this. Fear vanishes the very instant your spirit becomes convinced that you are protected by a higher power. A man cannot fear that which he knows cannot destroy his essential self. This lesson teaches you that truth until it becomes the very pattern of your subconscious mind. But you must not read it as a casual observer, as if you were watching a parade from a distance. You must read it as a participant, as a claimant, as a man stepping into a promise made for him before he drew his first breath. This covenant contains the boldest declaration a man can make against the darkness. It does not pretend that danger does not exist. To do so would be folly. Rather, it affirms that you are no longer subject to its sting. It removes you from the realm of panic and places you in the realm of faith. It does not erase the storms of life, but it renders them powerless to break your spirit. Now, imagine the life that unfolds when you begin every morning with that certainty. Imagine beginning your day with the decree, "He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him will I trust." Imagine the strength that enters your voice when you speak to your workmen or your associates. Imagine the calm that enters your mind when the ledgers do not balance. Imagine the courage that settles in your spirit when you must stand alone for a principle. Imagine speaking to your fears with the authority of the infinite behind you. The world around you may remain chaotic, but you will not. Your circumstances may remain uncertain for a season, but you will remain unshaken. Your path may contain obstacles, but you will not bow to them. You will move through life with a quiet boldness, unbothered by the noise that terrifies lesser minds.
Let me tell you a secret I learned in the steel mills and the boardrooms. When you carry the presence of fearlessness, the world takes notice. People sense a difference in your atmosphere. They sense a stability and an assurance that they themselves lack. They will look to you for guidance. They will trust your leadership. They will seek your counsel in the dark hours. Fearless men attract influence and capital because the world is starving for certainty. This is why this mental discipline must become your daily habit, not as a superstition, but as a spiritual weapon, a shield and a reminder that you do not walk this earth alone. Your life is covered. You dwell under a protection the world cannot understand and fear cannot overcome. So, steady your heart. Guard your attention with the same vigilance you would guard your gold. What you are learning here is the blueprint for fearless living. If you will receive it, repeat it, and claim it as your own, fear will lose its authority over your life. Each morning you will rise with the strength of one who walks beneath divine wings. This is the key. Unlock it, and fear will never rule your empire again. Every man lives within two worlds at once. The first is the visible world of circumstance, the world of fluctuating prices, of weather, and of the opinions of men. It is a world that trembles under the weight of fear. The second is the inner world of thought, the unseen kingdom where no man may enter but yourself. This inner kingdom is where every victory is won and every defeat is suffered before it ever appears in the physical world. When it is said, "He that dwelleth in the secret place," it refers to that inner dwelling. The secret place is not a location on a map, it is a state of mind. It is a fortress of faith that exists within you, waiting for you to occupy it with your belief. Most men live as exiles from this fortress. They rise each morning exposed to the winds of chance, hoping the day will be kind, but half expecting that it will ruin them. They look at the world and see only peril. Their thoughts wander like beggars through the dark alleys of doubt, and then they wonder why life strikes them without mercy. But the man who understands the law of success and the power of thought does not beg for peace, he dwells in it. He lives inside the conviction that he is guarded. He thinks from within that safety. He walks within it. He speaks from it. His mind becomes a citadel, and his heart a throne where calmness reigns supreme. Protection, my friends, begins in the mind. Fear cannot enter a consciousness that has accepted divine safety as its absolute law. You are not protected because you offer a hurried prayer in a moment of crisis. You are protected because you believe continually. The moment your faith becomes a constant habit, the very universe begins to organize itself around that certainty. Your subconscious mind is the bridge between your individual belief and the infinite. It accepts whatever thought you feed it as a direct command. If you feed it pictures of disaster, it will interpret your life through the lens of peril. But if you feed it assurance, safety, and trust, it will move the unseen forces of life to fulfill that assurance. The covenant is not merely a promise, it is a set of instructions on how to train the mind. Faith is not an occasional act, it is a residence. To believe is to move mentally into a higher dwelling. Fear may still cry out at the gates of your mind, but it cannot enter a house where faith keeps the watch. When you decide, with the finality of a business contract, that you live under the protection of the Almighty, you have withdrawn your permission from fear. I recall a story of a man who survived a great calamity at sea while the storm destroyed everything around him. He told me, I repeated the words of protection until I could feel a peace stronger than the crashing of the waves. That peace was his shield. The waves could not touch a mind that had already taken refuge in certainty. Fear and faith cannot share the same throne. When one sits, the other must depart. You must choose every single morning which of the two will rule your house. The law of fear that weakens the arm, or the law of faith that fortifies the soul? Fear whispers that you are a solitary atom in a cold universe. Faith reminds you that you are carried by the same power that moves the stars. Fear paints pictures of loss and ruin. Faith writes decrees of protection and increase. Fear convinces a man that he is separated from the source of all power. Faith restores the remembrance that he was never apart from it. The cure for fear is not resistance, it is remembrance. You do not defeat the darkness by wrestling with it, you defeat it by turning on the lamp. The man who remembers his connection to the infinite law steps instantly out of the reach of panic. Think of the sunlight. When you stand in its path, darkness has no existence. So it is with the mind that dwells in divine thought. Fear is but a shadow that disappears the moment you step into the light of faith. Every thought of protection you hold is a key that unlocks your secret place. Every repetition of truth builds a higher wall around your peace. We do not recite these truths for the sake of ritual. We speak them to impress belief upon the subconscious until that belief becomes as natural as the blood in our veins. Say within yourself now, I abide under the shadow of the Almighty. No fear can find me. No evil can reach my spirit. I dwell in peace, and peace surrounds my work. Let that not be a mere sentence, but a state of being. Each repetition deepens the foundation until faith becomes the very atmosphere in which you breathe. Fear is nothing more than a suggestion. It operates only through the faculty of the imagination. It cannot touch the man who has trained his imagination to picture protection and success instead of ruin. The fearful man imagines disaster until he feels its cold shadow. The faithful man imagines safety until he radiates its warmth. Both are using the same creative power of the mind, but only one is creating strength. The world will test your confidence. Storms will come to the markets. Opinions will threaten your peace. News will shake the timid and the unprepared. But the man anchored in the law remains calm. He does not deny the existence of the storm, but he denies its power to rule his inner kingdom. And that denial, spoken with the conviction of a master, becomes a decree that life itself must obey. The greatest battles of history were not fought on the fields of Europe, but in the thoughts of men. Every fear you conquer internally prevents 1,000 defeats in your external affairs. The moment you withdraw your attention from fear, you disarm it. The moment you turn your thought toward faith, you invoke invisible aid. Faith is a mental command that opens every hidden gate of strength within you. It is not blind, it endures long before human reason has failed. Faith is the silent law that connects you with the power that never trembles. When fear visits you, greet it with remembrance. Say to it, you have mistaken your address. I dwell in the secret place of the Most High. You have no authority here. Speak it until your own heart hears and obeys. The subconscious mind does not reason, it responds. Feed it confidence, and it will turn that confidence into circumstances that justify your trust. Feed it fear, and it will create the very evidence needed to confirm your dread. Choose your impressions wisely, for they are the stones with which you build the architecture of your life. The man who knows he is protected becomes a blessing to others without effort. His calm becomes their comfort. His composure steadies the shaking hands of his fellows. Even his silence teaches courage. I have stood beside men who radiated such faith that danger seemed ashamed to approach them. Their presence was a command. They did not speak of power, they embodied it. The world bends, often in ways we cannot see, around such souls, for nature itself respects certainty.
Let us continue our study of the internal government of the mind. for we are now entering the second hall of our great library of success. In the first part of our discourse, we established the foundation that the secret place is a mental state of absolute safety. Now, we must discuss the mechanics of how this fortress is maintained through the specific law of alignment and the scientific use of the subconscious. You must understand that every man who has ever risen from the humble position of a weaver's lad or a bobbin boy to the heights of industrial leadership has done so by mastering the second world I spoke of, the unseen kingdom of thought. Scripture tells us, "He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty." I want you to look closely at that word, abide. In the world of business, we know the difference between a transient laborer and a permanent partner. A visitor to a factory sees the smoke and hears the din, but he does not own the process. The man who abides is the one who has taken up permanent residence. He is the one whose interests are entirely at one with the firm. To abide under the shadow of the Almighty is to enter into a permanent partnership with infinite intelligence. This secret place is not found in the geography of the earth. It is not in the grand cathedrals or the silent forests alone. It is found in your awareness. It is a state of mind in which fear simply cannot breathe, just as certain delicate organisms cannot survive in the high, pure air of the mountain peaks. It is the fortress of faith that exists within every man, woman, and child, waiting to be occupied by the tenant of belief. Most men, unfortunately, live as beggars outside their own gates. They rise each morning exposed to every wind of rumor, every fluctuation of the market, and every shadow of doubt. They look at the visible world and see only danger. They look at themselves and feel small, insignificant, and unprotected. Their thoughts wander like vagrants through the dark alleys of what if and perchance, and then they wonder why the world strikes them with such relentless force. But the man who has studied the law of success does not beg for peace. He dwells in it as a right. He lives inside his conviction that he is guarded by an unseen power, a power more reliable than any standing army or any vault of gold. He thinks within this safety, he walks within it, and he speaks from within it. His mind becomes a citadel, and his heart becomes a throne from which a magnificent calmness reigns. You see, protection, true scientific protection, begins in the mind. Fear is a trespasser. It cannot enter a consciousness that has established divine safety as its primary law. You are not protected because you happen to remember a verse in a moment of panic. You are protected because you have made faith a continual habit of thought. The moment your faith becomes constant, the very universe organizes itself around that certainty. Consider the subconscious mind. It is the bridge between your individual will and the infinite. It is like the great machinery of a steel mill. It does not argue about the quality of the ore you feed it. It simply processes it. If you feed it pictures of failure, poverty, and danger, it will move the unseen forces of your life to fulfill those very conditions. But if you feed it the assurance of Psalm 91, the assurance of safety, divine trust, and invincible protection, it will act upon that impression with the same mechanical precision. The psalm is not merely a promise for the soul, it is a technical instruction for the training of the mind. Faith is not a sporadic act of the will, it is a residence. To believe is to move your mental furniture into a higher dwelling. Fear may still cry at the gate, but it cannot enter a house where the master mind keeps watch. When you decide, with the finality of a business decree, that you live under the protection of the Almighty, you have effectively withdrawn permission from fear. A man once told me of a terrible shipwreck he endured.
As the vessel groaned and the dark waters rose, he saw men around him lose their reason to terror. But he sat quietly and repeated the words of this covenant until he could feel a peace stronger than the storm. He told me, "Mr. Carnegie, the waves could not touch a mind that had already taken refuge in certainty. That is the law. Fear and faith cannot share the same throne. When one sits, the other departs. You cannot serve two masters in your counting house, and you cannot serve two emotions in your heart. You must choose daily which will rule you, the law of fear that weakens the arm and clouds the judgment, or the law of faith that fortifies the spirit and clears the vision. Fear whispers that you are a solitary atom drifting without purpose in a chaotic world. Faith reminds you that you are a necessary part of a divine plan, carried by a power that never sleeps. Fear paints pictures of loss. Faith writes decrees of protection. Fear convinces a man that he is separated from the source of all supply. Faith restores his remembrance that he was never, for one moment, apart from it. The cure for fear is not resistance, it is remembrance. You do not defeat the darkness of a cellar by wrestling with the shadows. You defeat it by opening the shutters and letting in the light. The man who remembers his connection to divine law steps instantly out of the reach of panic. Think of the sunlight in a great glen. When you stand in its path, darkness has no existence where the light abides. So it is with the mind that dwells in divine thought. Fear is nothing more than the shadow that disappears when you step into the light of faith. Every thought of protection you hold is a key that unlocks your secret place. Every repetition of truth builds a higher wall around your inner peace. We do not recite the words of the psalm for ritual's sake. We speak them to impress belief upon the mind until that belief becomes as natural as the beating of our hearts. Say within yourself now, with the authority of a master, I abide under the shadow of the Almighty. No fear can find me. No evil can reach the fortress of my soul. I dwell in peace, and peace surrounds my every endeavor. Let that be more than a sentence. Let it be a state of being. Each repetition deepens its foundation until faith becomes the very atmosphere in which you breathe. Fear is merely a suggestion. It operates only through the faculty of a runaway imagination. It cannot touch the man who has trained his imagination to picture protection and success instead of disaster and ruin. The fearful man imagines the worst until he feels its cold shadow. The faithful man imagines the best until he radiates its power. Both are creating their own reality, but only one is creating strength. The world will test your confidence, make no mistake. There will be storms in the markets, there will be opinions that threaten your tranquility, there will be news that shakes the timid and the unprepared. But the man anchored in the divine law remains as calm as a deep harbor. He does not deny the existence of the storm, for he is a man of reason, but he denies its power to rule his mind. And that denial, spoken with conviction, becomes a decree. Life obeys it. The greatest battles of our age are not fought with cannons on the field, but with thoughts in the silence of the heart. Every fear you conquer internally prevents 100 defeats externally. The moment you withdraw your attention from the object of your fear, you disarm it of its sting. The moment you turn your thought towards faith, you invoke invisible aid. Faith is a mental command that opens every hidden gate of strength within you. It is not blind, it sees farther than the eyes of the flesh can reach. It is not fragile, it endures long after the calculations of men have failed. Faith is the silent law that connects you with the power that never trembles. When fear visits you, and it will visit even the strongest of men, greet it with remembrance. Say to it, "You have mistaken your address. I dwell in the secret place of the Most High. You have no authority in this house." Speak it until your own heart hears and obeys. The subconscious mind does not reason, it responds to the dominant impression. Feed it confidence, and it will turn that confidence into circumstances that justify your trust. Feed it fear, and it will create the very evidence needed to confirm your dread. Choose your impressions as wisely as you would choose the partners in your firm, for they become the architecture of your life. The man who knows he is protected blesses others without effort. His
calm becomes their comfort. His composure steadies the hands of those who would otherwise falter. Even his silence teaches a lesson in courage. I have stood beside men of great industry who radiated such faith that danger seemed ashamed to approach them. Their presence was a command. They did not speak of power, they embodied it. The world bends, often in ways we cannot see, around such souls, for nature itself respects certainty. Spiritual protection is not an isolation from life, it is a mastery of it. It does not remove you from the challenges of the day, it removes fear's control over your response to those challenges. You will still walk among the storms of the world, but you will not belong to them. You will stand within the noise, but silence will reign in your heart. The law of divine shelter is the law of alignment. When your thoughts agree with the truth of your protection, life itself agrees with you. The moment you decide that you live in protection, you have already created the condition. Courage is the offspring of this certainty. The man who knows he is guarded dares to venture where others retreat. He steps forward while others hesitate. The secret of his confidence is not arrogance, it is faith, expressed through a calm, steady conviction. Understand that courage is not the absence of fear, it is the decision that faith is greater than any perceived threat. Each time you act in accordance with that decision, you strengthen the spiritual muscle that builds a permanent wall of protection around you. The fearless man becomes magnetic to all that is good. Courage draws strength, faith draws opportunity, peace draws guidance. When fear leaves your atmosphere, everything of power and value begins to approach your gates. I have known businessmen, leaders of state, and honest laborers alike who proved this law. One man, I recall, began each morning by reading the words of the covenant aloud before he ever left his home. Within a few months, he said his days unfolded with an uncanny sense of order. Delays that used to frustrate him seemed to dissolve. Helpers appeared exactly when they were needed. Difficulties that once seemed like mountains softened into mere hills. He had not changed the world, he had changed his dwelling. Fear makes a man vibrate in discord with the divine order of things. Faith restores the harmony. When your mind is at one with the divine law, you attract its protection as naturally as a magnet draws iron filings. It is not the words of the psalm alone that protect you, it is your belief in the principle behind them. The words are the seed, but your faith is the soil. You must cultivate both every day of your life. Repetition engraves belief. Belief creates a mental atmosphere, and that atmosphere becomes your protection. Once faith becomes habitual, fear finds no doorway through which to enter. And remember this, for it is a lesson in character. The peace you carry becomes the peace you spread. When a man dwells in calm confidence, he changes the temperature of every room he enters. His family feels safer, his workmen feel more secure, his business flows with a smoother current. Even strangers are lifted by his composure. You must strive to become that man, the one who carries the presence of quiet strength, who speaks few words but ensures all of them are steady, who walks through the greatest difficulties as though led by an unseen, friendly hand. Each morning, before the noise of the world can reach your ears, close your eyes and enter your secret place.
Picture yourself enveloped in a light of protection, shielded by an invisible calm. Speak your decree with the finality of a master. I dwell under the shadow of the Almighty. No fear can enter, no harm can prevail, no doubt can disturb my peace. Stay there until that peace becomes your very pulse. Then go forth into the world, not as one hoping for safety, but as one embodying it. The law of divine shelter is simple, but it is supreme. As you dwell in thought, so shall you dwell in life. Therefore, let your first dwelling be faith. Build its walls with conviction, roof it with gratitude, guard it with the habit of repetition. Fear may knock, but faith will answer, and peace will abide in your house forever. You must realize that the secret place is a fortress you carry with you into the marketplace. It is not something you leave behind when you step into the boardroom or the factory floor. It is a mental atmosphere that moves as you move. When you are confronted with a crisis, a sudden drop in production, a strike, or a loss of a major contract, the man of fear reacts with the primitive instincts of the animal. He flails, he shouts, he trembles, and in doing so, he loses his ability to think clearly. But the man who abides in the secret place takes a breath and retreats for a second into that inner silence. He remembers the covenant. He remembers that he is a partner with infinite intelligence. In that moment of alignment, the solution presents itself. The path becomes clear. The angels of which the psalm speaks, which are nothing more than the inspired thoughts and intuitions of the divine mind, whisper the way forward. I have often said that the man who acquires the ability to take full possession of his own mind may take possession of anything else to which he is justly entitled. This is the essence of my philosophy. The 91st Psalm is the greatest textbook ever written on how to take possession of the mind. It is a manual for mental self-discipline. It teaches you to refuse entrance to every thought that does not harmonize with your safety and your success. To live this way is to become invincible. It is to walk through a world of shadows with a light that never fails. It is to know with a certainty that passes all understanding that you are never alone, never unprotected, and never without the resources necessary to triumph. This is the life I desire for you, not a life free of work, for work is the greatest blessing of man, but a life free of the corrosive acid of fear, a life where you rise in strength, serve with joy, and rest in peace, knowing that you and the law are one. Let us move forward now with this understanding, for there is much more to uncover about the armor of thought and the power of the spoken word in our next gathering. We have deliberated upon the sanctuary of the mind and the scientific necessity of a disciplined subconscious. Now let us advance our inquiry into the third great hall of our philosophy, the forging of the armor of thought. It is not enough to simply know of a fortress. One must possess the equipment to defend it and the instruments to expand its influence. In the words of the covenant, it is written, "He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in him will I trust." I ask you to consider the weight of those words, not as a weary plea for mercy, but as a bold declaration of mental independence. Trust, as I have learned through the management of vast enterprises and the study of the human spirit, is not a mere feeling that descends upon a man by chance. It is an act of rigorous mental discipline. Faith is not a vague hope that things may turn out for the best. It is a system of training as precise as the metallurgy required to produce the finest Bessemer steel. The man who makes trust his daily exercise becomes in time untouchable to the corrosive influence of fear. Faith is the armor of the spirit. It does not arrive as a gift of birth, nor is it stumbled upon in a moment of crisis. It is forged in the furnace of daily life, through repetition, through deliberate decision, and through an unwavering obedience to divine order.
Just as the blacksmith in the glen hammers the glowing steel until its molecules are aligned and it becomes unbreakable, so must you hammer your own thoughts against the anvil of truth until they shine with the luster of certainty. The weak and the untrained may spend their hours praying for strength to meet an emergency, but the wise man builds his strength long before the emergency arrives. He constructs his armor through the habitual entertainment of thoughts that empower rather than deplete. You must realize that every idea you allow to reside in your mind either defends your castle or exposes it to the enemy. A single thought of fear, left unmonitored, is like an open gate through which an invading army may march. Conversely, a single thought of absolute faith, held with conviction, closes that gate and bars it against all intruders. The mind is the primary battlefield of human existence. Here and nowhere else, victory or defeat is decided long before the physical events ever unfold. When fear gains entry to a man's thoughts, he has already suffered defeat, no matter how much gold he may have in his vaults. But when faith commands the gate of the mind, all the adversity in the world loses its weapon against him. The covenant declares, "Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flieth by day." Consider the profound psychology of this promise. The terror by night represents the unseen, the intangible fears that creep silently into the imagination when the world is still, the dread of the future, the ghost of past failures, and the shadows of what might be. The arrow that flieth by day represents the visible, tangible crises that strike in the open market, the sudden industrial depression, the broken contract, or the public calumny. Yet the law remains the same for both. Neither the invisible shadow nor the visible shaft can harm the man who guards his thoughts with the vigilance of a sentinel. Mental discipline is the watchtower of the soul. It is the arduous but rewarding habit of refusing entrance to any image of danger, poverty, or misfortune. It is the deliberate act of substituting faith where fear once attempted to stand. This law of substitution is the governing principle of all inner transformation. You cannot remove a negative thought by fighting it with more negativity. That is like trying to sweep darkness out of a room with a broom. You must replace it with a thought of higher vibration. When fear whispers into your ear, "You may lose everything you have built," you must respond instantly with the decree, "I am protected by a law that never fails." When anxiety paints a picture of failure, you must speak to your own soul, "My fortress cannot fall, for its foundations are in the infinite." When the mind begins to tremble at the uncertainty of the times, you must command, "I trust the law of God, which never sleeps and never errs." You cannot think two opposing thoughts at once. The mind is so constructed that light and darkness cannot occupy the same space. Therefore, every moment you spend deliberately cultivating faith is a moment stolen from fear. A worker I once knew in the mills told me how he transformed his entire existence through this very principle. He had lived for years in a state of constant trepidation, fearing that he might lose his position and be cast into the street. Every morning his heart was heavy with a burden of doubt, and this internal weight made him timid, inefficient, and prone to error. But one day he resolved to change his mental dwelling. He began his mornings an hour earlier, before the smoke of the city rose, and read the 91st Psalm aloud. He did not read it for comfort, he read it as a soldier reads his orders. He spoke the words until he could feel a physical change in his own breast, a peace that replaced the old fluttering anxiety. Within weeks, his manner had undergone a total revolution. He walked with a quiet assurance. He worked with a new joy. He carried himself as one who was certain of his own value and of the favor of the universe. His superiors noticed not the words he spoke, but the composure he radiated. His promotion, which followed shortly after, was not a reward for his labor alone. It was a reflection of his new mental state. Faith is an invisible armor, yet those around you feel its presence as surely as they feel the heat from a furnace. There is a quality in the man of conviction that needs no explanation. It steadies those who are uncertain, it disarms hostility before a word is spoken, and it compels the respect of even the most cynical. Men may not understand the source of your strength, but they will know that it is not of an ordinary, fragile nature. Every piece of this spiritual armor must be forged through your own choice. Belief is the helmet that guards your vision, ensuring that you see opportunity where others see only ruin. Clarity of purpose is the breastplate that protects your heart from the arrows of discouragement, and your words, the spoken declarations of your faith, are the sword that carves a path through the confusion of the world. When you speak from a place of absolute faith, you strike at the very heart of fear's illusion and cause it to dissolve. Fear's greatest trick is to make you believe it has substance, that it is a solid wall you cannot pass, but in truth, fear is only a runaway imagination without the reins of discipline. Once you return the command of your mind to faith, fear vanishes like smoke in the morning sun. The process of building this armor is simple enough for a child to understand, yet so demanding that few men ever achieve its full power. It requires the daily exercise of repeating the truth until it becomes an automatic reflex of the mind. A single act of faith may win a small battle, but only a habit of faith can win a lifetime. The mind, much like the muscles of a laborer, grows stronger only through constant repetition. The man who trains his thoughts as diligently as an athlete trains his body becomes impervious to the defeats that crush the common man. In the beginning, this training may feel mechanical and perhaps even hollow. You may find yourself declaring your protection while your heart still trembles with old habits of dread. You may speak of faith while the cold winds of doubt still blow through your spirit. Do not be deceived by these fleeting emotions. The act of repetition itself is building the structure of your strength. Every word spoken with a definite intention lays another layer of steel on the armor of your mind. I have often told young men in my employ, belief is not something you are born with, it is something you build, brick by brick. You construct it through thought, through speech, and through the decisions you make when no one is watching. You hammer it with persistence until it becomes unshakable. Consider the blacksmith once more. His first strikes upon the iron are uncertain, and the metal seems to resist his will, but he does not stop. He continues to strike, the sparks fly, and eventually that which was rough and unyielding becomes a refined and useful instrument. So it is with your mind. The more you practice the habit of replacing fear with the certainty of divine protection, the stronger and brighter your belief becomes. Once this faith is built into a habit, it creates an atmosphere, a shadow of the Almighty that follows you everywhere. You will notice the results first in the small details of your life, a sudden peace in the midst of a hectic day, a clarity of thought when a problem arises, or a sense of success where there was previously only struggle. Others will begin to notice the change before you do. They will speak of your steadiness under pressure and your uncanny confidence when others are in a state of panic. They will sense a presence about you that commands trust and invites cooperation. This is the armor made visible. It is the outer proof of an inner law. When you have trained your mind to rest in the conviction of divine protection, even the dangers of the world will seem to respect your composure. The fearful man attracts harm because he expects it. His mind is a magnet for the very things he dreads. But the faithful man repels harm because he possesses a certainty that cannot be breached. There are two kinds of faith in this world. The faith of emergency, which cries out for help only when the storm has already broken the masts, and the faith of discipline, which has already prepared the vessel for any weather. The man of disciplined faith does not wait for trouble to remember the law. He remembers it before the sun rises. He repeats the promises of the covenant before the day has a chance to demand them. Faith must be exercised daily to remain vital. You cannot expect to lift the heavy weight of a great adversity if you have not spent your days lifting the smaller weights of daily meditation and mental control. Each morning's declaration of protection strengthens the muscle of your belief. Each evening's expression of gratitude reinforces the walls of your fortress. To live without this daily training is to leave your soul unarmed in a world that is often harsh and unpredictable. If I could command one daily ritual for every person who seeks success and peace, it would be this. Before you touch the work of the day, before you read the news of the world or listen to the complaints of men, put on your armor of thought. Read aloud your covenant of protection. Speak to your own subconscious as a captain speaks to his troops before a march. Say to yourself, "Today I march under the banner of faith, not fear. Today I command my mind to remain in confidence, not confusion. Today I abide under the shadow of the Almighty, where no evil may intrude upon my purpose." Do this with sincerity, and you will find that your day begins to obey your command. The armor of faith is not something you merely carry, it is something you become. It fuses with your very nature until courage replaces hesitation as your natural response to life. You will no longer need to pretend to be fearless, for you will have built fearlessness into the very fabric of your character. Remember always that every fearful image presented to you is an invitation for doubt to enter. You have the power to refuse that invitation. When the world shows you danger, do not deny its existence, for we must be men of facts, but deny its power to rule your peace of mind. The fortress of faith does not remove the storms of life, but it renders them harmless to your spirit. When you meet with adversity, declare inwardly, "My trust is my armor. My belief is my fortress. My thoughts are guarded by a law that cannot be broken. Therefore, no fear can pierce me." Say it until the words feel as solid as iron within you. This is how you forge a protection that will endure through every change of fortune. The man who lives by this discipline finds that courage becomes an instinct, a reflex that serves him in every hour of need. When others tremble, your calm will become their counsel. When others retreat, your confidence will be their example. This is the silent leadership of faith, the kind of leadership that guides without shouting and protects without a sword. Fearless living is the natural result of disciplined thinking, of faith practiced until it is more real than the world of appearances. Every day that you choose trust over dread, you are adding to the strength of a fortress that no earthly power can breach. So, put on your armor each morning with the quiet conviction of a man who knows his own strength. Let faith be your clothing, trust be your shield, and clarity be your crown. You will find that life itself begins to honor you, for life has a way of obeying the man who truly believes. You will walk through the uncertainties of this age as though surrounded by a great light, and you will find that the peace you have built within is the most powerful protection you will ever possess.
My friends, let us now step together into the fourth great hall of our industrial and spiritual temple. We have discussed the sanctuary of the mind, the scientific mechanics of the subconscious, and the forging of the armor of thought. Now, we must address a principle so vital that without it, the finest armor is but a heavy burden, and the strongest fortress but a silent tomb. I speak of the law of invisible assistance, the profound truth that no man who walks in alignment with the divine law ever walks alone. In the covenant of the 91st Psalm, it is written with startling clarity, "For he shall give his angels charge over thee, to keep thee in all thy ways." I ask you to set aside for a moment the imagery of the Sunday school and look at these words through the lens of a man of affairs. To the man of industry, angels are not merely winged figures of myth, they are the intelligent forces of infinite intelligence. They are the unseen currents of good, the inspired thoughts, the sudden intuitions, and the fortuitous arrangements of circumstance that attend to the man who possesses a definite purpose and an unwavering faith. No man has ever achieved greatness in any field of human endeavor, be it the building of a railroad, the founding of a university, or the management of a great estate, relying solely upon his own physical strength or his own isolated intellect. Every great leader of men, whether he confessed it openly or not, has been the beneficiary of a partnership with the unseen. This is the mastermind in its highest form, the alliance between the individual human spirit and the infinite mind of the Creator. When you live in accordance with the law of success, you awaken a movement in the unseen world that the common fearful man can neither see nor comprehend. Consider the nature of this assistance. The fearful man, whose mind is clouded by the soot and smoke of doubt, vibrates in discord with the universe. He is like a telegraph operator trying to send a message through a storm of static. The signal is lost, and no help can find him. But the man of faith, the man who dwells in the secret place, keeps his mental channel clear. He vibrates in harmony with the divine order. Consequently, the angels, these messengers of infinite intelligence, find easy passage to his consciousness. They appear as the right idea at the midnight hour, the unexpected meeting with a valuable ally, or the sudden hunch that saves a fortune from a falling market. I have known men who were called lucky by their competitors, but I tell you there is no such thing as luck in a universe governed by law. What men call luck is simply the law of invisible assistance in operation. I recall a time in the early days of my bridge-building enterprises when a great difficulty threatened to halt our progress. The engineering problems seemed insurmountable, and the capital required was beyond our immediate reach. I did not give way to panic, for I had already made it my habit to reside in the secret place. I held my mind steady in the conviction that the solution already existed in the infinite mind. One afternoon, while walking in the quiet of the glen, an idea came to me, not with a shout, but with the stillness of a whisper. It was an entirely new method of construction that reduced both cost and labor. Simultaneously, I received a letter from a gentleman I had not seen in years, offering the exact cooperation I required. The world would call this a coincidence. I call it the angels having charge over my ways. Because I had set my mind upon the law responded by arranging the people and the ideas necessary for my success. You must realize that infinite intelligence cannot force its counsel upon a mind that is barred by fear. Help is always available, but it must be invited through the medium of faith. The mind at peace is the only receiver capable of catching the broadcast of divine wisdom. This is why the discipline of calmness is so essential to the man of business. When you are in a state of agitation, you are effectively deaf to the very guidance that would lead you out of your trouble. You are swimming against the current of the river, exhausting your strength, when you could simply turn and let the current carry you to the shore. They shall bear thee up in their hands, lest thou dash thy foot against a stone. Think of the stones in your own path, the daily hindrances, the misunderstandings with partners, the delays in transportation, the friction of the marketplace. When faith rules your spirit, you find yourself lifted above these petty annoyances. You develop a sixth sense that allows you to see the stone before your foot strikes it. This is not mysticism, it is the natural result of mental alignment. The man who is one with the divine law becomes sensitive to the rhythms of life. He knows when to move and when to stand still. He knows whom to trust and whom to avoid. He is guided by an inner compass that never points towards failure. I have observed this law in the lives of all the great builders I have known. Think of the late Mr. Rockefeller, a man of profound faith and unyielding discipline. In the face of the most vitriolic public criticism and the most complex industrial challenges, he remained as steady as a rock. He did not waste his energy in anger or fear. He kept his counsel and listened to the inner voice of his own purpose. The result was an organization of such precision and power that it changed the world. He understood that when a man's ways please the law, even his enemies are made to be at peace with him, or at the very least, they are rendered powerless to stop his progress. The angels of the covenant often manifest as human agents. You will find that when you carry an atmosphere of fearless certainty, you attract people of a similar vibration. The right secretary, the loyal foreman, the brilliant engineer, these are the hands that bear you up. But they are drawn to you by the magnetism of your own faith. If you walk in fear, you will attract the timid and the treacherous, for like attracts like in the mental world. But if you walk in the shadow of the Almighty, you will find yourself surrounded by a mastermind group that multiplies your results 1,000-fold. I urge you to cultivate a relationship with this invisible assistance. Do not wait for a crisis to call upon the infinite. Make it your daily practice to acknowledge the partnership. Each morning, as you prepare to descend into the arena of trade, say to yourself, I am guided today by an unseen wisdom. Every person I meet and every event that occurs is part of the divine plan for my success. My invisible partners are arranging my path in perfect order. When you speak these words with conviction, you are literally giving the angels charge over you. You are setting the invisible machinery of the universe in motion on your behalf. I have stood in the midst of great industrial strikes where the air was thick with hostility and the threat of violence was real. In those moments, I did not look at the angry faces or listen to the shouts of the agitators. I retreated into my secret place. I affirmed that peace was the only reality and that a just solution was already being prepared. Time and again, I saw the most volatile situations resolve themselves in ways that were fair to both capital and labor. I saw men who were bitter enemies shake hands in mutual trust. This was not my doing alone. It was the work of the invisible assistance that responds to the man who refuses to see anything but the law of harmony. Remember, my friends, that you are never alone in your struggle for independence. The same intelligence that spins the planets in their orbits and directs the migration of the birds is attentive to your smallest business transaction. It waits only for your recognition. When you live in fear, you are like a man who tries to light his house with a candle when he has a great electrical dynamo at his disposal. You are ignoring the vast resources of the infinite. But when you step into the covenant, you turn on the light. You connect yourself with the source of all power, all wisdom, and all protection. This law of invisible assistance is constant and unwavering. It does not play favorites. It responds to the weaver at the loom as readily as it does to the president of the steel corporation, provided both apply the principle of faith. Awareness is the key. The fearful man lives in a world he believes is out to get him, and so his invisible angels are unable to reach him through the wall of his own doubt. The faithful man knows the world is a friendly place, governed by a law that desires his good, and so he finds help at every turn. Let this be your practice. When you encounter a closed door, do not pound upon it with the fists of frustration. Stand still in your faith and wait for the guidance. Often the door is closed because a much better one is about to open. When you face a loss, do not mourn it as a defeat.
See it as a clearance of the old to make way for the new and the better. Trust that the angels are bearing you up, even when the path feels steep and the stones are sharp. In the great empire of business, the men who endure are those who have learned to rely upon something more substantial than their own cleverness. They have discovered that there is a power that makes for righteousness and for success, and they have made that power their silent partner. They move through the world with a quiet dignity and an unshakable poise, for they know they are being kept in all their ways. They do not hurry, for they know they can never be late for their own good. They do not worry, for they know that the law never fails to meet its obligations. So I say to you, accept your invisible assistants. Give them charge over your thoughts, your words, and your actions. Walk with the confidence of a man who has the most powerful allies in the universe at his beck and call. For when you truly abide under the shadow of the Almighty, you will find that the path of success is not a lonely climb, but a guided journey. You will find that the angels are real, that the protection is absolute, and that the victory is certain. Let us carry this awareness into our next lesson, where we shall discuss the discipline of peace as a source of power. But for now, rest in the knowledge that you are carried. Trust the hands that bear you up. And remember, he who walks with the infinite never walks in the dark. Let us now enter the fifth great hall of our industrial and spiritual palace. We have explored the fortress of the mind, the scientific nature of the subconscious, the forging of the armor of thought, and the reality of invisible assistance. Now we must turn our attention to the most vital of all disciplines, the discipline of peace. You have heard it said in the covenant, "He shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust." To the unrefined mind, this sounds of mere softness, but to the man of business, it is a lesson in the highest form of power, power in perfect, serene control. I have seen the great blast furnaces of Pittsburgh, where the heat is so intense it would consume a man in an instant. Yet that heat is not chaotic. It is governed, directed, and contained within walls of firebrick. So it must be with your spirit. The wings of which the psalmist speaks are a symbol of that divine containment. To be truly fearless in this competitive age, you must learn that peace is not a state of passivity. It is a state of supreme authority. There is no man on this earth so strong as the one who remains entirely composed when the world around him is in a state of agitation. In the building of my own enterprises, I learned early on that the untrained mind is a reactive mind. It is like a piece of drift timber in the river, tossed about by every wave and snagged by every branch. But the disciplined mind, the mind that has taken up residence in the secret place, is the master of the current. Fear, you see, thrives upon reaction. It feeds upon the frantic movement of the nerves and the noise of the worried tongue. But when you become still within your own soul, fear dies of starvation, for it finds no fuel upon which to burn. Peace is the furnace where true courage is forged. Every storm that rages outside your counting house becomes powerless the very moment that silence takes command within your heart. I recall with great clarity a fellow of my acquaintance in the steel trade who faced the imminent collapse of his firm during a period of severe industrial depression. His associates were in a state of visible panic. They paced the floors, they shouted at their subordinates, and they made a dozen different plans in a single hour, only to discard them all. But this man did something different. He retreated to his private library and sat in absolute silence for 2 hours each day. He read the 91st Psalm, not as a prayer for help, but as a method of cooling his own mental temperature. He repeated the words of the covenant until his heart believed more in the law of protection than it did in the reports of the ticker tape. Days passed, and while his competitors were running in frantic circles, exhausting their vitality and their credit, he waited in stillness. In that silence, a single magnificent idea came to him, a way to repurpose his machinery for a new market that no one else had yet seen. That idea
born of peace, not only saved his firm, but multiplied his fortune tenfold. Peace had given him access to the storehouse of infinite intelligence, a door that is always barred to the man in a state of panic. Fear rushes, faith waits. This is a law of industry as much as it is a law of the spirit. The mind in fear acts too quickly, driven by the goad of desperation, or it fails to act at all, paralyzed by the weight of dread. But the mind in faith, the mind that abides under the shadow, acts only when it is guided by the calm conviction of the mastermind. You must learn to pause before you decide. You must learn to breathe deeply before you speak. You must center your thought before you move a single pawn on the board of life. This is not delay, it is the mastery of timing. He who governs his own inner temperature will never find himself boiling in anger or freezing in the grip of dread. I call this the law of inner temperature. Fear heats the mind into a state of chaos and friction, where parts rub against parts until the machinery of reason breaks down. Faith, however, cools the mind into a state of crystal clarity. The man of peace is like a calm, deep sea that reflects the heavens with perfect accuracy. The man of panic is like a stormy, shallow wave that distorts every image of truth it touches. When your mind is still, the infinite mind can reflect its perfect order through your thoughts. When your mind is troubled, that divine wisdom is distorted and cannot reach your conscious understanding. Peace, my friends, is a quality that must be trained. It is not something one finds by chance. It is developed through the deliberate refusal to worry. You may argue that you cannot help but worry when the stakes are high and the danger is real. I tell you that is a fallacy of the weak. Worry is nothing more than thought repeated without the presence of faith. Faith is thought repeated with the presence of absolute trust. Both are habits of the mind. One destroys the delicate tissues of the spirit, while the other restores them. Each time you take a worry and replace it with a firm affirmation of the law, you are strengthening the habit of peace. Say quietly to yourself when the day is at its most demanding, I walk in peace. I am covered by the divine calm of the Almighty. No storm of man can disturb the center of my soul, for my spirit abides in the refuge of the law. Speak it until you feel the physical tension release from your shoulders. Speak it until your breathing slows to a rhythmic, steady pace. Speak it until the world and its problems feel small, and your own soul feels as vast as the firmament. Then you will know that peace is not merely the absence of noise, it is your authority over it. Consider the great inventor, Mr. Edison. I have seen him in the face of what others would call a catastrophe. When his laboratory was consumed by fire, destroying the work of years, he did not give way to despair. He did not shout at the heavens or tremble with fear for his future. He stood with a calm that was almost majestic and said to his son, "Go and get your mother. She'll never see a fire like this again." He lost a fortune in equipment that night, but he did not lose his faith in the law of increase. The very next morning, he began to rebuild, using calmness as his primary tool. Within a few months, his works were greater than they had ever been. That is the discipline of peace, the refusal to let external ruin disturb the inner order of the mind. Fear magnifies every problem, turning a molehill into a mountain that blocks the path. Faith, however, reduces every problem to its proper, manageable size. To see the world as it truly is, you must remain steady. The archer only hits the center of the mark when his hand is perfectly still and his eye is clear. The mind only hits the truth when it is calm. The moment you lose your peace, you lose your aim in life. But the man who maintains his composure holds dominion even in the face of temporary defeat. The world bows, often against its own will, before the man it cannot shake. Peace is power at rest. It does not need to argue. yet it is the most persuasive force in any negotiation. It does not need to shout, yet its voice is heard above the din of the marketplace. It does not need to hurry, yet it always arrives precisely when it is needed. The quiet mind is more commanding than the loudest voice of any foreman or politician, for true authority speaks from the depth of silence. The noisy, agitated soul may command a moment's attention, but the peaceful, steady soul commands the lasting respect of the ages. Remember the words of the covenant, "His truth shall be thy shield and buckler." What is this truth? It is the knowledge that divine law governs all things, from the rotation of the suns to the smallest transaction of the clerk. Truth is the understanding that you are never outside of the law of protection, never beyond the reach of infinite guidance, and never cut off from the source of all supply. To live in this truth is to shield yourself from the very possibility of panic. When you know that the universe is orderly, just, and friendly to the man of purpose, fear cannot deceive you with its miserable illusions. The man of peace sees through appearances. He knows that chaos is only a temporary lack of alignment, that difficulty is merely instruction in a higher grade of life, and that delay is often the direction of a wiser hand. He does not react to the first signal of trouble because he has trained himself to ask, "What is the truth that hides behind this shadow?" That question itself is a manifestation of strength, for it replaces the animal reaction of the nerves with the divine reason of the mind. To cultivate this power of peace, I urge you to practice the discipline of silence. Spend a few minutes each morning before you enter the smoke and bustle of the city in a state of deliberate quietness. Let the noise of the world's opinions and the clamor of the world's needs fall away from you until you can hear the faint, steady rhythm of peace within your own breast. In that stillness, affirm to your own soul, "Infinite intelligence orders my path today. I am safe. I am calm. I am certain." Do this daily, and your very
nerves will begin to obey you. Your heartbeat will become steady, and your thought will become as clear as a mountain stream. You will discover that peace is a craft that can be mastered, and once it is mastered, it becomes your natural state of existence. Peace multiplies your power because it conserves your vital energy. The frantic, worried mind leaks strength through 1,000 different holes of anxiety. But the peaceful mind stores that strength and focuses it like a lens. A man at peace can accomplish more in a single hour of focused work than a worried man can achieve in a week of frantic effort. This is because the man of peace acts with the entirety of his being. There is no divided will within him, no wasted motion, no internal friction. To act from a place of stillness is to act with the full weight of the infinite behind you. Do not mistake excitement or nervous motion for true energy. Fear often disguises itself as a great rush of activity, but it is an activity that leads only to exhaustion. True strength is quiet. The great oak tree does not shout as it grows, yet its roots deepen every day until it can withstand the fiercest gale. So too does your faith grow in the silence. Your calmness is the measure of your growth. Your patience is the proof of your power. The psalmist wrote, "He shall deliver thee from the snare of the fowler and from the noisome pestilence." What is the snare? It is the distraction of the world's noise. What is the pestilence? It is the contagious panic of the crowd. Both of these lose their power in the presence of a man of peace. When you stop reacting to the suggestions of fear, fear can no longer entangle you in its net. When you stop feeding the pestilence of doubt with your own thoughts, it perishes for lack of a host. Many men in our age mistake motion for progress. They run, but they have no destination. They talk, but they have no message. They fight, but they have no faith. The man of peace does not rush. He moves with a deliberate, measured step, guided by an inner certainty that is invisible to the world. The crowd may mistake his quietness for passivity, yet when the storm has passed and the wreckage is cleared, he is the only one left standing. Peace is the signature of true strength. It is the calm hand of the pilot that directs the great ship through the fog. It is the composed voice of the leader that settles the conflict in the boardroom. It is the quiet faith of the mother that rebuilds the home after a loss. You must make it your supreme goal to be such a person, to let nothing, neither the loss of gold nor the change of governments, disturb the throne of your own mind. Fear will test you, my friends. It will attempt to provoke a reaction from you. It will whisper in the dead of night, "You must do something now, or all will be lost." Do not obey that voice of panic. Instead, take a breath, remember the covenant, and say, "I am safe in the divine order. Nothing urgent exists in the eyes of the infinite. I act from peace, not from panic." In that very instant, infinite intelligence can guide you, for you have returned to a state of harmony with the law. As you live this way, you will notice a transformation in how the world responds to you. People will come to you in their moments of crisis, not because you have more money, but because they trust your composure. They will seek your advice and follow your lead because they find in your stillness a refuge for their own troubled hearts. That is the magnetic quality of the discipline of peace. It commands the world without ever having to issue a loud order. Do not let the world convince you that you must join its anxiety to prove that you are an earnest man. True compassion and true leadership do not come from sharing the confusion of others, but from offering them your clarity. You help your neighbor most by remaining unshaken yourself. Their fear may be loud, but your silence will always be more powerful. Peace is the discipline of the masters. It is the mark of those who have truly conquered themselves. You cannot govern a great industry until you have governed your own emotions. You cannot lead a nation until you have led your own nerves into a state of quietude. So each day, practice peace as though it were the highest form of labor. Sit quietly, breathe with the rhythm of the law, and repeat the truths of the covenant until your heart is anchored. Let the 91st Psalm be your daily meditation and your mental fortress. Then, when the winds of life rise, you will not tremble. You will smile, for you will remember that peace is not the reward you receive at the end of the journey. It is the very evidence of the faith that carries you through. You have entered the secret place where fear cannot breathe, and there you shall abide, under the shadow of the Almighty, in power and in peace forever.
Let us convene in the 6th hall of our ongoing inquiry into the laws of life and industry. We have discussed the fortress of the mind, the scientific mechanics of the subconscious, the forging of the armor of thought, the reality of invisible assistance, and the supreme discipline of peace. Now, we must turn our focus to the engine of our progress, the law of habitual faith. You have heard it said in the covenant that he shall cover thee with his feathers, and under his wings shalt thou trust. To the common observer, this sounds like a promise of passive comfort, but to the man of business and the student of the law of success, it is a revelation of the highest psychological principle, that the mind is the builder of all conditions, and what it repeats, it eventually believes, and what it believes, it inevitably creates. In the words of the psalm, we find not merely comfort, but a method for the formation of character. Each line is a mental pattern by which a man's thoughts are trained to dwell in the light of certainty rather than the shadows of dread. The man who repeats these truths with the conviction of a master is not merely reciting ancient literature, he is constructing a mental fortress more durable than any block of granite I ever pulled from a quarry. For habit, my friends, is the invisible architecture of a man's destiny. You must realize that your subconscious mind, that silent, tireless servant that keeps your heart beating and your breath flowing, does not possess the faculty of argument or reason. It is like the fertile soil of a vast estate. It does not care whether you plant the seeds of thistles or the seeds of grain. It simply obeys the command of the impression it receives and works night and day to bring that impression into the physical world. When you declare daily with the authority of your own soul, "I dwell in the secret place of the Most High," you are doing much more than offering a sentiment. You are issuing a directive to the deepest part of your being. Every repetition of this truth deepens the groove of confidence in your brain until a time comes when the mind can no longer think in the language of failure or fear. Repetition is not a hollow ritual. It is the scientific reinforcement of the spirit. Each spoken truth is a brick laid upon the wall of your protection. The more you repeat these laws, the higher that wall becomes, and the calmer your heart beats in the face of the world's noise. Faith does not blossom in the mind through occasional flashes of inspiration. It grows by the steady, persistent warmth of constant, directed thought. The man who trains his mind every morning to dwell in the pattern of peace will eventually find that fear cannot even locate him, for he has moved his vibration to a plane where fear has no residence. The psalmist spoke of abiding under the shadow of the Almighty. I want you to consider the industrial weight of that word. In the world of commerce, there is a vast difference between the transient speculator who visits a market for a day and the established merchant who abides there year after year, building a reputation and a trust. To abide means permanence. It means you no longer oscillate between the poles of hope and despair, but have taken up a permanent residence in the conviction of your own safety. A man I once knew in the great conflict of the Civil War told me that he survived the most terrible battles not by his rifle alone, but by his discipline of mind. He recited the 91st Psalm every hour of the day until it became the very background of his consciousness. He told me, "Mr. Carnegie, the bullets seemed to lose their terror, and my hand became steady because I had convinced my soul that I was covered." That was not a miracle of chance. It was the law of habit responding to a determined conviction. Faith repeated until it becomes a habit is the only true armor a man possesses. Doubt, when allowed to linger, also becomes a habit, a poisonous one that paralyzes the arm and clouds the judgment. You are always, in every moment of your waking life, programming the delicate machinery of your mind through the words you speak and the images you entertain. Every declaration of safety is a command to your inner forces to stand guard. Every whisper of fear is a counterfeit prayer that invites the very thing you dread. When you recite the truth often enough, the heart eventually joins the tongue. Once emotion and word are united, a new belief is born, and once a belief is firmly rooted in the subconscious, it must, by the very law of the universe, manifest as your physical experience. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. When this line of the covenant becomes your habitual thought, you undergo a radical transformation of character. You cease to see yourself as a victim of the times or the markets, and you begin to see yourself as a victor over them. The world of industry may tremble, and the houses of finance may shake, but you stand unmoved, not because you are arrogant, but because your mental discipline has made you larger than the trouble. Repetition removes doubt in the same way that the rising sun removes the shadows of the glen, gradually, perhaps, but with an absolute inevitability. The subconscious cannot serve two masters. The constant affirmation of your divine protection eventually expels every trace of fear until peace becomes as natural to you as the act of breathing. I grant you that in the beginning this training may feel mechanical. You may feel as though you are merely mouthing words while the old fears still flutter in your breast. Do not let this discourage you. Habit is built not by the intensity of a single moment, but by the persistence of many. As a stonecutter in my native Scotland strikes the rock 100 times without a visible crack, only to have it split in two on the 101st blow, so does each repetition of faith chip away at the mountain of your disbelief. You are not just saying words, you are reorganizing the very atoms of your character. Consider the life of any man who has built a great fortune or a great institution. It was not sudden luck that sustained him, but a daily, unrelenting habit of thought. In my own life, I made it a rule to review my purpose and my faith every morning before the smoke of the mills filled the air. I did not wait for the day to challenge me. I challenged the day. I reaffirmed my partnership with the infinite. The repetition of these beliefs turned my imagination into a tool of empire. You must apply this same law to your spirit. Read the Covenant not as a piece of literature to be admired, but as a blueprint for your own mental mastery. Every day spent without the deliberate repetition of truth is a day that your mind is allowed to drift to the weeds of doubt. Nature abhors a vacuum, and if you do not fill your mind with the thoughts of your protection, the world will fill it for you with the thoughts of your peril. Therefore, let no sun rise without your declaration of faith, and no sun set without your expression of gratitude. When you recite the law, strive to feel its weight. When you feel it, believe it. When you believe it, you will find yourself acting with a new, quiet authority. Faith cannot remain a mere theory if it is to save a man. It must become a habit of his being. Speak it while you walk to your place of business. Speak it while you rest in the heat of the noon. Speak it as the final thought before sleep claims you. Soon you will notice that the terrors of the night visit you less frequently, and the arrows of the day seem to miss their mark. Your confidence will become constant, not because the world has changed, but because you have changed your mental dwelling. Use this affirmation daily, for it is the bread of the strong. This day I am protected by a law that never errs. I am guided by an intelligence it knows all paths. I am fearless because I am one with the source of all power. Every time you say this with sincerity, you are deepening the armor of your soul. Your subconscious will take these words as an absolute command and will adjust your nerves, your heart, and your very instincts to match them. You will find yourself becoming calmer in the midst of the most harrowing industrial crisis. You will find your decisions becoming sharper and your vision becoming longer. Repetition is the mother of all mastery. The psalm promises, "He shall call upon me, and I will answer him." But I tell you that calling is not a single desperate cry in the dark. It is a continual communion. The more often you call upon the law through the habit of faith, the clearer the channel between you and the infinite becomes. When faith is repeated until it becomes a habit, it forms a clear, unobstructed conduit through which divine wisdom can flow into your affairs. I have seen the most timid and hesitant of men become towers of strength through this simple practice of mental discipline. I knew a man who began the habit of reciting the covenant over his family and his business every morning. At first, it was a task of the will. Later, it became a delight of the soul. After many months, his entire environment had changed. The atmosphere of his home became one of profound peace, the friction in his office dissolved, and even his health, which had been failing under the weight of worry, was restored. The words had built a vibration of faith so constant that it became the very law of his life. Repetition engraves, just as the constant dripping of water carves its way through the hardest marble, so do your daily affirmations shape your mind into an unshakable belief. The longer you dwell on a truth, the more real it becomes
To you, until the outer world has no choice but to conform to your inner vision. For he shall give his angels charge over thee. Each time you repeat this, you are renewing your awareness of your invisible partners. You are reminding your subconscious that help is assigned, that your protection is continuous, and that you are never left to your own meager devices. These reminders awaken the dormant forces of your soul and put them to work in your favor. I must also caution you against the danger of idle or fearful speech. Every word spoken in doubt undoes the work of 100 words spoken in faith. Each complaint you utter is a stone removed from the wall of your fortress. Each worry you share with your neighbor is an invitation for the enemy to return. You must guard your tongue with the same vigilance you would guard the secrets of your laboratory. Speak only that which strengthens your belief and the belief of those around you. When your emotions finally align with your repetitions, the real transformation begins. Speak your affirmations not as a beggar pleading for a crust, but as a ruler issuing a decree that cannot be questioned. Feel the authority of the infinite behind your voice. You are not asking the universe for protection. You are acknowledging that protection already exists by law. Say it aloud. Because I dwell in the divine order, no harm can find me. Because I live in faith, fear has no place in my heart. Because I speak the truth is my shield. Speak it slowly and with absolute certainty. Feel the vibration of each word as it strengthens the fibers of your mind. This persistence creates a new mental chemistry within you. Your nerves will begin to settle, your breathing will become deeper, your very presence will begin to radiate a quiet, formidable power. Persistence in the habit of faith creates a state where your subconscious begins to reject doubt automatically, just as a healthy body rejects a germ. That is the moment you have achieved mastery. You have trained your mind into a divine habit. So, I urge you, let this be your daily labor. Before you touch the ledgers of the world, open the ledger of your own soul. Repeat the covenant, not to remember the words, but to remember who you are and whose you are. You are the dwelling place of faith, the vessel of a peace that passes understanding, and the heir to a protection that the world can neither give nor take away. Each morning you declare these truths, you are raising the standard of your own kingdom. Fear will come to you less as a storm and more as a passing shadow that has no power to wound. This is the law of repetition and spiritual habit, that faith becomes permanent only through persistence, and that the man who repeats the truth daily will one day awaken to find that the truth is repeating itself through his every action. You will become as steady as the great turbines that power our cities, constant, powerful, and serene. And when others ask you the secret of your composure in a world of chaos, you will tell them that you have built your house upon the rock of a daily habit, and that you dwell in a place where the words of the covenant have become the very law of your life. My friends, let us now step together into the seventh great hall of our industrial and spiritual temple. We have deliberated upon the sanctuary of the mind, the scientific mechanics of the subconscious, the forging of the armor of thought, the reality of invisible assistance, the discipline of peace, and the law of habitual faith. Now, we must confront a principle of such startling power that it marks the transition from the man who is merely protected to the man who is truly a master of his destiny. I speak of the law of divine dominion, the truth revealed in the covenant when it declares, "Thou shalt tread upon the lion and adder, the young lion and the dragon shalt thou trample under feet." I ask you to look closely at these words, not through the eyes of a dreamer, but through the eyes of a builder of empires. This single verse contains a secret that few men in the history of commerce or statecraft have ever fully grasped. That you were not created to be a victim of your fears, but to be their absolute sovereign. The covenant does not conclude by merely offering you a place to hide. It ascends to the height of sovereignty. It teaches us that true fearlessness is not the absence of danger, but the active mastery over it. Every man who breathes the air of this free land is born with the seal of dominion written upon his very soul. He was designed by infinite intelligence to command his circumstances, not to cower before them, to govern his own mind, not to gravel in the dust of indecision, to stand upright as a reflection of the divine mind, not to crawl beneath the shadows of his own creation. Yet fear, that great thief of human potential, strives daily to dethrone you of this birthright. It attempts to convince you that you are subject to forces beyond your control, to the whims of the market, the opinions of the crowd, or the accidents of fate. The 91st Psalm restores the scepter to your hand. When it speaks of treading upon the lion and the adder, it is speaking in the language of symbols that every man of affairs can understand. The lion represents the loud, roaring fear, the sudden industrial crisis, the public confrontation, the visible threat that demands an immediate response. The adder represents the silent, subtle fear, the hidden poison of worry, the slow seep of doubt, or the secret dread of future loss. The man who abides in the secret place does not run from either. He walks over them. He silences the roar of the crisis with his composure, and he neutralizes the venom of the doubt with his certainty. Fear, my friends, loses its power the very instant it is faced by a mind settled in faith. It is a biological and spiritual fact that fear thrives only on avoidance and hesitation. Like a cowardly cur, it grows bolder when you turn your back to run. But the moment you stand your ground and look it in the eye with the authority of the law, it slinks into the shadows. Dominion is the law that allows no enemy, be it a thought of poverty or a threat of failure, to remain unchallenged within the kingdom of your mind. You must learn to speak to your fears as a master speaks to a rebellious servant, calmly, decisively, and without the slightest trace of emotional agitation. When a thought of dread attempts to seize your attention, you must declare, "You have no authority in this house. This mind is under the government of divine law, and it recognizes only the reports of faith." These are not mere words, they are decrees in the unseen world. They carry a vibration that literally reshapes the circumstances of your life. I have observed that the timid man pleads with the universe for a reprieve, while the fearless man issues a command to the law. The difference between them is not of arrogance, but of understanding. The man of dominion knows that infinite intelligence responds to decisiveness, not to desperation. Think of the great characters of history who have stood alone against the roar of the world. Think of young David before Goliath. He carried no heavy armor and no standing army. He carried only a conviction. His words were his primary weapon. "This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand." That was not a request, it was a decree. It was the exercise of dominion, and it brought down a giant that 1,000 trembling soldiers could not move. This is the same power that the covenant grants to you today, the authority to declare victory before the first blow is ever struck. The man who exercises dominion does not deny the existence of danger, for we must always be men of facts, but he looks directly at that danger and says, "You are subject to law, and I am one with the law that governs you." That awareness disarms every threat, for the external world cannot rule where the internal spirit refuses to yield its throne. When you learn to govern your own mind, the world of industry and commerce begins to obey you. It is a strange and beautiful truth that the storm may still rage in the streets, but its direction changes when it meets a man of dominion. The very forces that once seemed to oppose your progress begin to assist you.
Failure is transformed into a lesson in higher engineering. Obstacles are converted into the very stones that build your staircase to success. Dominion does not remove the challenges of life. It gives you the power to put them to work for you. I urge you to make this your daily practice. Look at every difficulty as a lion or an adder over which you have been given the right of passage. Repeat this truth until it becomes a part of your blood. I tread upon all fear. It cannot rule me. I live under the authority of the infinite, and my spirit commands my world. Speak it with the quiet intensity of a man who knows he is backed by the entire wealth of the universe. You are not the hunted of fear. You are the master of faith. You rule your thoughts, your words, and your destiny with the authority of the law. Nothing contrary to my peace can stand before me. Speak it until your voice is as steady as the foundation of this house, for calmness is the true tone of authority. Dominion over fear is dominion over life itself. Every challenge you master expands the borders of your inner kingdom. Every victory of peace over panic makes you a more formidable builder of the empire of business and a more faithful steward of the gospel of wealth. You were not born to crawl. You were born to walk the high places. You were not designed to be a seeker of refuge forever. You were designed to become a refuge for the world. Dominion means that you now carry the atmosphere of safety with you, and that fear cannot dwell where you dwell. Go forth now treading upon the lions of crisis and the adders of doubt with a firm and certain step. For the man who knows his own dominion is the man who truly abides under the shadow of the Almighty.
We now enter the 8th great hall of our temple of industrial and spiritual achievement. We have laid the foundations of the mind, forged our armor, and claimed our dominion. Now we must discuss the ultimate purpose of this fearless living. For what is the use of a fortress if it does not protect a treasure? And what is the use of a master if he has no mission? In the closing verses of our covenant, we find a promise that is also a command. Because he hath set his love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high, because he hath known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. This, my friends, is the law of partnership and the call to action. It is the realization that a man's life reaches its highest peak of power only when he recognizes that his individual success is a part of a much larger divine enterprise. In the world of business, we know that no great corporation can stand if its directors are at war with one another. Success requires a mastermind, a harmony of purpose and effort. To live in the covenant of Psalm 91 is to enter into the greatest mastermind alliance in the universe. It is to move from the isolation of the I to the invincible power of the we. I have often spoken of the gospel of wealth, the idea that a man who acquires a surplus of means is but a trustee for his less fortunate fellows. But before a man can become a trustee of gold, he must become a trustee of his own spirit. He must realize that his fearlessness is not for his own vanity, but for the service of the world. The world is starving for men who are not afraid. It is looking for leaders who can look a crisis in the eye and remain unshaken. It is seeking builders who can construct hope where others see only ruin. This is your call to action, to become a living demonstration of the law of success and the power of faith. You must understand that knowing the name of the infinite, as the psalm describes, is not a matter of theology, it is a matter of recognition. To know the name is to know the nature of power. It is to recognize that behind every blast furnace, every railroad, and every scientific discovery, there is a creative intelligence that responds to the call of a determined mind. When you set your love upon this law, meaning when you commit your heart and your will to living in harmony with it, deliverance is no longer something you have to beg for. It becomes an industrial necessity. The law must deliver you, for you have become an instrument of its own progress. I recall a time in the early days of the steel industry when the skepticism of the public was a greater obstacle than the engineering of the mills. Men whispered that we were reaching too high, that the weight of our ambitions would crush us, and that the fluctuations of the market would leave us penniless. Had I listened to the voices of fear, the world might still be waiting for the bridges and skyscrapers that steel made possible. But I had made a pact with the law. I called upon the infinite, and the answer came not in words, but in the arrival of men like Captain Jones and Henry Phipps, partners who shared the vision and the faith. We were delivered from the snares of doubt because we had anchored our purpose in something higher than our own individual greed. This is the secret of true honor mentioned in the covenant. Honor is not the applause of the crowd. It is the recognition by the law that you have proven yourself a faithful steward of its power. When you stand in the midst of trouble, as the psalm promises, you will not stand alone. You will feel a presence beside you that the fearful cannot see. You will find a solution that the frantic cannot find. You will possess a peace that the world can neither give nor take away. But this partnership requires your active cooperation. You must be willing to call, which is to say, you must be willing to act with the expectation of success. A call to action is not a frantic rush into the unknown. It is the deliberate movement of a man who knows his path is protected. I have seen many men fail because they spent all their time in prayer and none of their time in practice. They asked for protection, but they continued to think thoughts of fear. They asked for success, but they refused to obey the law of service. I tell you, the infinite does not reward the idle. It rewards the active participant in its own laws. To call upon the law is to put your hand to the plow with the absolute conviction that the harvest is already prepared. Let us look at the practical application of this in your daily life. What is the great lion that stands in your path today? Is it a business difficulty that seems insurmountable? Is it a personal sorrow that threatens to dim your light? Is it a social problem that makes you feel powerless? Your call to action is to stop looking at the problem and start looking at the covenant. Retreat for a moment into your secret place, affirm your partnership with the infinite, then step out and do the work that lies before you with the quiet boldness of a man who knows he cannot fail. The man who truly understands Psalm 91 does not wait for the storm to pass before he begins his work. He works through the storm, for he knows that he is covered. He does not wait for the capital to appear before he begins his plan. He begins the plan with the faith that the capital is already on its way. This is the hallmark of the master. He acts as if the promise were already fulfilled. He does not ask, "Will I be delivered?" He declares, "I am delivered now." And in that declaration, the invisible forces of the universe are aligned with his will. I challenge you to become a scientific philanthropist of the Spirit. Just as I have spent my latter years distributing libraries and universities for the elevation of the race, I want you to distribute the wealth of your own fearlessness. When you meet a man who is trembling with anxiety, do not join him in his trembling. Offer him your composure. When you encounter a situation that is ripe with conflict, do not add your own anger to the fire. Offer the cool water of your peace. This is how you honor the law, by becoming its representative in the marketplace. Remember, the promise of long life and satisfaction is the result of a mind that has ceased to fight against itself. A man who lives in fear is constantly at war with his own biology. His nerves are strained, his heart is taxed, and his judgment is clouded. But the man who lives in the covenant is in a state of internal peace. His energy is conserved and directed towards constructive ends. He lives long because he lives well. He is satisfied because he has found the only thing that can truly satisfy a human soul, the realization of his own divinity and his partnership with the infinite. Your action today must be this: Resolve here and now to never again allow a thought of fear to reside in your mind for more than a second. Treat every doubt as a trespasser on your private estate. Eject it instantly with the authority of the law. Spend your hours in the habit of saving, not just of gold, but of mental energy. Save your strength for the building of your character and the service of your fellows. Make it your mission to prove to the world that the principles of Psalm 91 are as practical and as reliable as the laws of chemistry or physics. The world is full of talkers who speak of faith but act in fear. I call you to be a doer. Let your success be your sermon. Let your calmness be your testimony. Let your resilience be your proof. When the fluctuations of the world attempt to shake you, stand as a monument to the law of success. Show the men of this generation that the secret place is a reality that can be lived in the midst of the most demanding industrial life. This is the culmination of our journey together through the halls of wisdom. You have the blueprint, you have the armor, you have the invisible assistance, and you have the authority of dominion. Now you must have the courage to apply it. The covenant is signed on the part of the infinite. It only awaits your signature through your daily thoughts and actions. Do not delay. The world has enough cowards. It has enough critics. It has enough victims. What it needs are men who are set on high because they have known the name of the law and have dared to live accordingly. Go forth today, not as a solitary man struggling for a living, but as a partner with the Almighty. Walk into the counting house, the factory, or the halls of government with the quiet dignity of one who is kept in all his ways. Speak the truth with boldness, act with justice, and rest in the absolute certainty of your protection. For when a man truly sets his love upon the law, there is no height he cannot reach, no problem he cannot solve, and no fear that can stand before him. This is the promise, this is the law, and this is your destiny. I leave you with this final call. Awake to your power. Occupy your fortress. Put on your armor, and let the peace that passes all understanding govern your every move. You are the architect of a fearless life, and the infinite is your foundation. Build well, build high, and build for eternity.
My friends, let us now enter the 9th great hall of our industrial and spiritual palace. We have discussed the sanctuary of the mind, the scientific mechanics of the subconscious, the forging of the armor of thought, the reality of invisible assistance, the discipline of peace, the law of habitual faith, and the authority of divine dominion. Now, we must turn our focus to a principle that is the very cornerstone of my philosophy, both in the building of fortunes and the building of men, the law of the mastermind and the unity of purpose. You have heard it said in the covenant of the 91st Psalm that because he hath set his love upon me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high because he hath known my name. To the man of limited vision, this sounds like an individual reward for a solitary soul. But to the student of the law of success, it reveals the most profound secret of all achievement, that no man can truly be set on high until he has learned to coordinate his mind with the minds of others and with the infinite mind of the Creator. This is the ultimate form of partnership. I have often said that no person can become a great success without the help of others. In the vast complex of the steel industry, I was not the man who moved the coal, nor the man who operated the blast furnaces, nor the man who calculated the stresses of the great bridges. My success was the result of a mastermind, an alliance of many minds, all focused with a single, definite purpose. But what few realize is that the most important member of any mastermind group is the invisible partner, the infinite intelligence that responds when men work in harmony. The covenant tells us that when a man calls, the answer is guaranteed. But I ask you to consider, what constitutes a true call?
It is not a cry of desperation, it is an act of coordination. When two or more minds are blended in a spirit of perfect harmony for the attainment of a definite objective, there is created a third, unseen power that is greater than the sum of its parts. This is the secret place made manifest in the world of affairs. When you align your purpose with the divine purpose, which is the elevation of the race and the creative expression of the spirit, you become an irresistible force. Consider the nature of industrial cooperation. I have always maintained that the interests of capital and labor are one. When the employer and the employee recognize their mutual dependence and work together in a spirit of trust, the angels of productivity and peace attend their efforts. But when there is friction, when there is fear, and when there is a lack of unity, the machinery of industry breaks down. The same law applies to your own spirit. If your mind is divided, if part of you desires success while another part fears failure, you are at war with yourself. You have no mastermind. You are a house divided, and your fortress cannot stand. To dwell in the secret place is to achieve a state of mental unity. It is to focus every faculty of your being, your imagination, your reason, your willpower, and your faith upon a single righteous goal. When you achieve this unity, you have set your love upon the law. You have aligned your individual will with the divine will. In that moment of alignment, you are delivered from the confusion of the world. You are set on high because you have recognized that your power is not your own, but is a portion of the infinite power. I recall a great crisis in the early days of my career when I was attempting to consolidate the various interests that would eventually become the Great Steel Corporation. The obstacles were immense, the jealousies of men were sharp, and the threat of financial ruin was ever present. Had I approached this task as a solitary man, I would have been crushed by the weight of it. But I did not. I sought the cooperation of men like Henry Clay Frick and Charles Schwab. We formed a mastermind group. But more importantly, I retreated daily into my own inner silence to align my purpose with the law of increase and the good of the public. I realized that if our purpose was to build something that would serve the world and the laws that govern it would support us. This is the salvation that the psalm speaks of at its conclusion. Salvation is not merely a promise for the hereafter, it is a practical reality for the here and now. It is the state of being saved from the consequences of one's own errors, one's own fears, and one's own limitations. When you walk in unity with the divine law, you are saved from the snare of the fowler, which is the trap of small-mindedness and greed. You are saved from the noisome pestilence, which is the contagious doubt of the masses. You are shown the salvation of a life that is directed by wisdom rather than by chance. I want to speak to you about the responsibility that comes with this power. The gospel of wealth is not merely a rule for the distribution of gold. It is a rule for the distribution of thought. If you have found the secret place, if you have built your fortress of faith, you have a sacred duty to lead others to that same refuge. You cannot be set on high merely to look down upon your fellows. You are set there to lift them up. A man's true wealth is the good he does in the world, and the greatest good you can do is to radiate an atmosphere of such profound peace and certainty that others are encouraged to find their own strength. In my later years, I have found my greatest satisfaction, the satisfaction promised in the covenant, not in the acquisition of more mills, but in the founding of libraries and the promotion of peace. I realized that the long life promised to the faithful is a life that continues to bless the world long after the individual has passed from the scene. My salvation has been the discovery that I am a part of a great eternal movement of progress. When you align yourself with this movement, you lose your fear of death and your fear of time. You realize that you are working with the infinite, and the infinite is never in a hurry and never fails. Look at your own life today.
Are you working in isolation, or are you building a mastermind? Are you seeking only your own gain, or are you seeking the good of the whole? If you are struggling, if you feel that the lions are closing in, it is because you have forgotten the law of unity. You have tried to be a fortress unto yourself. I tell you, no man is an island. You must open your mind to the cooperation of others and to the guidance of the infinite. You must call, and your call must be a declaration of your willingness to serve the divine plan. The covenant says, I will be with him in trouble. I ask you to consider the magnificence of this partnership. When the market collapses, when the industry shifts, when the world seems to be in a state of chaos, the law is with you. It is not watching from a distance. It is the very strength in your arm and the very clarity in your brain. But it can only be with you if you are with it. If you descend into the gutter of fear and complaint, you have stepped outside the partnership. You have broken the contract. To keep the contract, you must keep the faith. You must maintain your inner unity and your outward service. I challenge you to expand your vision of success. Do not be satisfied with the mere accumulation of things. Seek the honor that comes from being a master of yourself and a servant of the law. This honor is the only thing that will satisfy you in the evening of your life. When you look back upon your years, you will not care for the titles you held or the gold you hoarded. You will care only for the moments when you stood in the secret place and acted with the boldness of a son of the infinite. You will care for the men you encouraged, the institutions you built, and the peace you maintained when others were in a state of panic. This hall of unity is the place where we realize that all the laws we have studied are but different facets of a single great law, the law of love. Not the love of the sentimentalist, but the love of the builder, the love of order, the love of harmony, and the love of progress. When you set your love upon this law, you have achieved the highest form of human consciousness. You have become a mastermind in your own right. You are no longer subject to the terrors of the night, for you have found the light that never fails. You are no longer afraid of the arrow that flieth by day, for you are hidden in the shadow of the Almighty. Let this be your meditation for this hour. I am at one with the infinite mind. My purpose is aligned with the divine purpose. I work in harmony with my fellow men and with the laws of the universe. Therefore, I am protected, I am guided, and I am set on high. No discord can enter my soul, and no failure can touch my work. Speak this until you feel the power of unity flowing through your veins. Feel the strength of the mastermind as it coordinates every thought and every action. You are now standing at the threshold of the final hall of our temple. You have learned the laws of the mind and the laws of the spirit. You have seen how they apply to the great empire of business and to the humble walk of the individual. You have been called to action, and you have been promised a partnership. There is but one step remaining: the full realization of your salvation and the attainment of a life of total satisfaction. This is the ultimate promise of the covenant, and it is the ultimate destination of every soul that dares to believe. Go forth now, not as a solitary worker, but as a member of the divine corporation. Carry the name of the infinite in your heart and the law of success in your hand. Be a builder of peace and a master of your own destiny. For the man who dwells in the unity of the mastermind is the man who truly abides under the shadow of the Almighty, and his victory is as certain as the rising of the sun. We have at last reached the 10th and final hall of our spiritual and industrial temple. We have traveled far, from the initial tremors of fear in the morning light to the absolute coronation of the soul in the law of divine dominion. You now stand as men and women who possess the blueprints of a fortress, the metallurgy of an unbreakable armor, and the partnership of the infinite.
But there remains one final question that every man of affairs must ask when he is presented with a great truth. How shall I ensure that this treasure is preserved? How shall I remain in constant connection with the source of this power? The covenant concludes with the most magnificent promise of all. With long life will I satisfy him and shew him my salvation. I ask you to consider the word satisfaction. In our age of restless striving, where men pile up gold only to find it turns to dust in their hands, true satisfaction is the rarest of all commodities. It is the peace of the man who knows that his work is good, that his path is protected, and that his soul is anchored in the eternal. This is the salvation I have sought to show you, not a distant hope for the next world, but a present mastery of this one. But let me speak to you with the frankness of a Scotsman who has seen both the bottom of the ladder and its highest rung. The laws we have discussed, the law of the mastermind, the law of habitual faith, and the discipline of peace, are not like the steel we produce in our mills, which stays where you put it. They are living, vibrating principles of the mind. If they are not constantly cultivated, if they are not regularly reinforced by association with other minds of like purpose, they will begin to fade. The smoke and noise of the world are relentless. They strive every hour to dim the light of your conviction and to lure you back into the valley of fear. This is why I come to you now with a final, vital invitation. You must not let this be a solitary moment of inspiration that vanishes with the setting sun. To remain set on high, you must join a permanent alliance of those who seek the same heights. You must become a regular communicant in this school of fearless living. I ask you to subscribe your name and your attention to this ongoing chronicle of success. This is not for my benefit, for I have all that the world can give. It is for yours. Why should a man of affairs, a builder of homes, or a seeker of truth subscribe his interest to these lessons? Let me give you the reasons of a practical mind. First, because association is the mother of character. You cannot walk with the fearful and remain brave. You cannot listen to the doubters and remain certain. By subscribing your attention here, you are entering into a mastermind alliance with the great thinkers and builders of the past and present. You are ensuring that at regular intervals, your mind will be washed clean of the soot of the marketplace and refreshed with the pure air of the secret place. You are choosing your neighbors in the world of thought, and I tell you, a man's neighbors determine his destiny. Second, because the law of habit requires constant feeding. We have learned that the subconscious mind obeys repetition. If you hear these truths but once, they are but a pleasant melody. If you hear them weekly, they become a habit. If you hear them daily, they become your very nature. By subscribing, you are establishing a rhythmic call to the infinite. You are setting a watchman at the gates of your mind who will remind you, precisely when you are most tempted to tremble, that you abide under the shadow of the Almighty. This regularity is the secret to that long life and satisfaction we all desire. Third, because the world is entering an era of unprecedented change, and only the man with a steady compass will survive. The industries of tomorrow will demand a type of leader who possesses more than mere technical skill. They will demand men of spiritual poise. By remaining a part of this circle, you are receiving the most advanced training in mental engineering. You are learning to use the master key to riches, which is the possession of your own mind. You will be shown the salvation of clear vision when your competitors are blinded by panic. And finally, subscribe because you have a duty to the race. The gospel of wealth teaches us that we are our brother's keepers. By strengthening your own faith and your own success through these lessons, you are becoming a lighthouse for others. Your subscription is your vote for a world governed by peace and law, rather than by fear and force. It is your commitment to being a doer and a builder. My friends, the covenant is open.
The fortress is built. The invisible assistants are standing at their stations. The only thing missing is your determined presence. Do not walk away from this library only to return to the dark alleys of doubt. Sign your name to this alliance today. Press the button of your intent and join us. Let us walk together toward that life of satisfaction and honor that the law has prepared for those who know its name. I have spent my life building bridges of steel to connect the cities of men. I offer you now a bridge of thought to connect your soul with the infinite. Cross it with me. Subscribe your heart to this purpose, and I promise you, as surely as the sun rises over the Atlantic, that you will find yourself walking in a new world, a world where fear has no power, where failure is but a ghost, and where you dwell now and forever under the shadow of the Almighty. Go forth in peace, be strong, be fearless, and remember, the law is with you if you are with the law.